store always felt different after closing time. The lights stayed on, but the world outside grew quiet. Cars passed less often. The street sounds softened. Inside, the air smelled like coffee, cleaning spray, and warm shelves. The young cashier stood behind the counter, counting the drawer with careful hands. He had learned to double-check everything. Small mistakes could cost him hours of work, and he could not afford that. He had started this job to help his family. The pay was not much, but it was steady. Each night, he told himself the same thing. Stay calm. Finish the shift. Lock up. Go home. He repeated it like a rule because rules made the night feel safer. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. It was almost closing time. The cashier stacked receipts, wiped the counter, and glanced at the glass door. Outside, the streetlight flickered. Shadows moved across the sidewalk. He tried not to stare too long. He did not want to imagine trouble where there might be none. But trouble had a way of finding him. Earlier that evening, a group had been hanging around near the store. They leaned against the wall, laughing too loudly, throwing looks through the window. He had seen them before. They never bought anything. They just watched. Sometimes they made comments under their breath. Sometimes they knocked on the glass. Tonight, they stayed longer than usual. Inside the store, another customer walked slowly down the last aisle. The man was older, with broad shoulders and a quiet way about him. He wore a dark jacket and boots that looked worn but strong. He did not rush. He studied the shelves like time did not matter to him. The cashier noticed him but did not think much of it. Late-night customers came in many forms. The bell over the door rang as the clock hit closing time. The cashier locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. His chest tightened, as it always did at that moment. He was alone now, or so he thought. Alone with the work. Alone with the silence. He started cleaning the coffee area. He wiped the counter, dumped old grounds, and rinsed the pot. His thoughts drifted to home. He pictured the narrow hallway, the soft hum of the fan, the way his phone buzzed with messages asking when he would be back. Those thoughts kept him steady. A loud knock broke the calm. He froze, sponge in hand. Another knock followed, harder this time. Laughter came from outside. The cashier swallowed and walked to the door, careful and slow. Through the glass, the same group stood close together. Their smiles were sharp. One of them pointed at the closed sign and laughed. "We're closed," the cashier said through the door. His voice sounded smaller than he wanted. "Come back tomorrow." One of them knocked again. Another cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted something the cashier could not fully hear. He shook his head and stepped back. Inside, the older customer paused at the end of the aisle. He turned his head slightly, listening. He did not move closer. He did not step away. He simply watched. The cashier returned to the counter and tried to ignore the noise. He focused on mopping the floor. The steady back and forth helped calm him. For a few moments, the knocking stopped. He let out a breath he did not know he was holding. Then the door handle rattled. The sound sent a shock through him. The door was locked. He checked it every night. Still, his heart raced. He reached for the phone behind the counter, just in case. A sudden crash echoed through the store. The door burst open as the group forced their way inside. The bell rang wildly. The cashier stumbled back, nearly dropping the phone. The group spread out, blocking the exit. "Relax," one of them said, grinning. "We just want to talk." The cashier's mouth went dry. He raised his hands slightly, showing he meant no harm. "You need to leave," he said. "The store is closed." They laughed again. One leaned over the counter, invading his space. Another kicked a display, sending snacks spilling onto the floor. The sound felt too loud in the small store. "Why you always act scared?" one of them asked. "You think rules protect you?" The words stung, but the tone hurt more. The cashier stayed quiet. He had learned that answering back only made things worse. He focused on breathing, slow and steady. From the back of the store, the older customer took a step forward. His boots made a soft sound on the tile. He still said nothing. His eyes moved from face to face, calm and focused. The bullies noticed him and laughed. "What's this?" one said. "You got company?" The cashier glanced toward the man, then back to the group. "Please," he said. "Just leave." One of them reached toward the register. The cashier tensed, ready to pull it away. His hands shook, but he stood his ground. "Don't," he said quietly. The air felt heavy. Time slowed. The older customer moved closer now, standing near the end of the counter. He rested one hand on the surface, relaxed but firm. His presence changed the space, like a door closing behind them. "That's enough," the man said. His voice was calm, not loud, not angry, just steady. The group turned toward him. For a moment no one spoke. Then one laughed and stepped closer. "And who are you?" The man did not answer right away. He looked at the cashier first, then back at the group. "He asked you to leave," he said. "You should listen." Something in his tone made the laughter fade. The cashier felt a strange mix of relief and fear. He did not know this man. He did not know what would happen next. But he was no longer alone. Outside, the streetlight flickered again. Inside, the store held its breath. Part of the night had already changed, though none of them fully understood how yet. The silence after the warning felt thick and strange. The group stood still, as if the words had slowed them down. The cashier could hear his own breathing. He kept his eyes on the counter, afraid that if he looked too long at anyone, it might turn into a challenge. One of the group broke the pause with a short laugh. "You think you run this place now?" he said, stepping closer to the older man. "We're just having fun." The older man did not move back. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. "Fun ends when someone says stop," he replied. "You heard him." The cashier felt a small lift in his chest. It was not courage yet, just a breath of it. He gripped the edge of the counter to keep his hands from shaking. He thought about the camera above the register, about the phone behind the counter, about the locked door that no longer felt so strong. Another member of the group wandered toward the aisle and kicked a fallen snack bag aside. "You always working this late?" he asked the cashier, smiling without warmth. "Must be lonely." The cashier did not answer. He focused on the floor, on the mop streaks that needed another pass. He had learned that silence sometimes kept things from getting worse. But silence also made them bolder. The older man shifted his weight slightly, placing himself more clearly between the group and the counter. "You're done here," he said. "Go." That word landed heavier than the others. The group looked at one another. One rolled his eyes. Another scoffed. The one closest to the counter leaned in, lowering his voice. "Or what?" he asked. For a moment, the cashier thought something bad would happen. His heart pounded so hard it made his ears ring. He thought of his family again, of the long walk home, of how this job was supposed to be simple. The older man met the challenge without flinching. "Or you walk out while you still can," he said. There was no threat in the words, no promise of harm, just certainty. That certainty made the room feel smaller. The laughter faded. One of the group took a step back. Another glanced toward the door. The bell above it swayed slightly, still from when it had been forced open. "Man, forget this," someone muttered. The leader hesitated, eyes moving from the older man to the cashier and back again. "You think you're scary?" he said, though his voice had lost its edge. The older man did not answer. He did not need to. The group backed toward the door, still talking, still trying to save face. "This place ain't worth it," one said. "We'll catch you later." The cashier's stomach tightened at those words. Later was the part he feared most. Later meant tomorrow or the next night or the long walk home when the streets were dark. As the door swung open and the group stepped outside, the older man moved with them, guiding the moment without touching anyone. The bell rang again, softer this time. The door closed. The lock clicked. The store felt empty in a new way. The cashier leaned against the counter, legs weak. He let out a breath that sounded like a sigh and a laugh mixed together. He realized his hands were still shaking. "Thank you," he said quietly. The older man turned back toward him. Up close, his face showed lines earned from years of sun and wind. His eyes were calm, not proud. "You okay?" he asked. The cashier nodded, though he was not sure it was true. I think so. They stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of the coolers and the distant sound of a car passing outside. Normal sounds returning slowly. I don't like nights like this, the cashier said before he could stop himself. The words slipped out, honest and tired. Feels like no one's watching. The older man gave a small nod. Someone's always watching, he said. Sometimes you just don't see them. The cashier glanced at the door, then at the windows. They've been hanging around a lot, he said. I try to keep my head down. That works until it doesn't, the older man replied. You did right asking them to leave. The cashier looked surprised. It didn't feel like enough. Enough doesn't always feel loud, the man said. The cashier thought about that as he finished cleaning. The older man stayed near the counter, not rushing him. He bought a small item he did not seem to need, placing exact change on the counter. You heading home after this? The man asked. Yeah, the cashier said. Just a few more things. I'll wait, the man said. Those two words eased something deep inside the cashier. He finished locking the back room and turned off the coffee machine. The lights dimmed one by one, leaving the store in a soft glow. When they stepped outside together, the air felt cooler. The street was quiet again. No shadows near the wall. No laughter. The older man nodded toward the road. You'll be all right, he said. The cashier watched him walk away, steady and unhurried. Only then did he notice the patch partly hidden beneath the jacket, worn edges telling stories without words. The cashier did not fully understand what it meant. Not yet, but he knew one thing for certain. That night, someone had stood up when it mattered. And that changed more than just the end of a shift. Sleep did not come easily that night. The cashier lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the sounds of the store over and over. The knock on the glass, the laughter, the calm voice that had cut through the noise. Every time he closed his eyes, his body tensed as if it were happening again. Morning came too fast. He dragged himself out of bed and went through his routine. Wash his face. Drink a quick cup of tea. Check his phone. A few messages waited, asking if he was safe after his late shift. He typed back short replies. He did not want to worry anyone. On the walk back to the store that evening, he felt different. His steps were slower, more careful. He kept looking over his shoulder. The street looked the same as always, but his mind filled it with shadows. He wondered if the group would be waiting again. He wondered if the older man would show up. He wondered what he would do if neither happened. The store lights were already on when he arrived. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar smell. For a moment, the space felt safe. Then the feeling faded, replaced by memory. The shift started quietly. A few customers came and went. Some nodded. Some avoided eye contact. He smiled when he could. He always did. Smiling made the hours pass faster. As the night grew later, the quiet stretched. He found himself listening more closely than usual. Every sound felt sharper. The hum of the cooler, the click of the register, the soft ring of the bell. When the door opened near closing time, his heart jumped. It was just a delivery worker picking up a forgotten item. The cashier let out a slow breath once the door closed again. He locked up at closing time just like always. The sign flipped. The door clicked shut. His chest tightened, but he stayed steady. He told himself the same rule again. Stay calm. Finish the shift. Go home. As he wiped down the counter, movement outside caught his eye. Across the street, shapes gathered near the wall. His stomach dropped. He recognized the way they leaned, the way they laughed. They were back. This time, they did not knock right away. They watched. The waiting felt worse than the noise. The cashier kept cleaning, pretending not to notice. He hoped they would get bored and leave. Inside the store, someone else browsed the aisles. The cashier noticed the boots first, then the jacket. The same older man. The sight of him brought a mix of relief and confusion. The man caught the cashier's eye and gave a small nod. Nothing more. No words. Just acknowledgement. Outside, the group crossed the street. The cashier's hands shook as he picked up the mop. He focused on the floor, on the pattern of tiles, on breathing slowly. He did not want to show fear. The knock came again. Then another. Louder this time. "We know you're in there," someone shouted. The cashier stepped back from the door. "The store is closed," he said, keeping his voice level. "Please leave." Laughter answered him. The door rattled, but it did not open this time. The lock held. The cashier reached for the phone again, just in case. From the back of the store, the older man stepped closer. He stood beside the cashier, not in front of him, but close enough to share the space. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. The words meant more than the cashier expected. He nodded without looking up. Outside, the group grew louder, banging on the glass, making jokes for each other. Inside, the store felt like a small island surrounded by noise. The older man watched them through the window. His face did not change. "They want a reaction," he said. "Don't give it to them." Minutes passed. The knocking slowed. The laughter faded. One by one, the figures stepped back from the glass. The cashier waited until they were gone before breathing freely again. His legs felt weak, but he stayed standing. "Why do they do that?" he asked quietly. The older man thought for a moment. "Because they think no one will stop them," he said. The cashier nodded. That answer made sense. They stood together in silence, listening until the street returned to normal. The older man checked his watch. "I'll stay until you're done," he said. "Thank you," the cashier replied. This time the words felt stronger. As they waited, the cashier found himself talking more. About work. About being tired. About feeling invisible most nights. The older man listened without interrupting. "When I was younger," the man said at last, "I learned that quiet doesn't mean weak." The cashier looked at him. "It doesn't always feel that way. It takes time," the man said. When closing tasks were finished, they walked outside together again. The street was empty. The air felt calmer. The cashier locked the door and checked it twice. He turned to thank the man again, but the man had already started walking away. Before disappearing into the dark, he paused. "You handled yourself well," he said. "Remember that." The cashier watched him go, feeling something new settle in his chest. It was not confidence. Not yet, but it was the start of it. That night, the fear did not follow him all the way home. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like progress. The next evening began with a strange calm. The cashier arrived early, unlocking the door and stepping inside with a careful breath. The store lights flicked on one by one, filling the room with a steady glow. He set his bag down and stood still for a moment, listening. Nothing felt wrong. That alone felt unusual. He moved through the opening routine slowly, stocking shelves, checking the register, straightening the counter. Each small task helped settle his nerves. He reminded himself that most nights passed without trouble. He reminded himself that fear could make ordinary sounds feel bigger than they were. Customers came in waves. A worker grabbing a drink. Parent buying snacks. A tired face paying in exact change. The cashier greeted each one with the same polite tone. He noticed his voice sounded steadier than before. Not fearless, just steadier. As night crept closer, the street outside thinned out. The cashier kept an eye on the windows while he cleaned. He did not see the group. That should have been a relief, but it made him uneasy. Quiet could mean peace, or it could mean waiting. Near closing time, the familiar boots appeared again at the door. The older man stepped inside and gave a short nod. The cashier felt his shoulders drop without thinking about it. "Evening," the cashier said. "Evening," the man replied. The man moved slowly through the aisles, picking up an item here and there. He seemed in no hurry. The cashier returned to his work, comforted by the simple fact that someone else was there. The clock reached closing time. The cashier locked the door and flipped the sign. He felt the usual tightness in his chest, but it did not grow the way it had before. Outside, footsteps approached. The cashier froze, eyes fixed on the glass. Shapes moved into view. The same group. Their faces showed no surprise. They had expected him to be there. One of them tapped the window lightly, smiling. The cashier stepped back from the door and spoke through the glass. "The store is closed. Please leave." The tapping grew louder. Another joined in. Their voices rose, words blending into noise without meaning. The older man walked up beside the cashier. He did not rush. He did not touch him. He simply stood close enough to share the moment. "They're testing you," he said quietly. "Seeing if tonight will be easy." The cashier swallowed. "I don't want trouble." "No one does," the man replied. "But wanting peace doesn't mean accepting disrespect." The door rattled as someone pulled on it. The lock held firm. The cashier reached for the phone, but the older man gently shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "Let's see if words do the job." The man stepped closer to the glass. He looked directly at the group. His face was calm, but his eyes were clear and firm. "You've been told to leave," he said, voice carrying through the door. "This ends now." The group laughed, but it sounded forced. One stepped forward, pressing his face close to the glass. "Who's gonna make us?" he asked. The older man unzipped his jacket just enough for the patch beneath to be seen clearly. He did not point to it. He did not boast. He simply let it be visible. The laughter stopped. The cashier noticed the change before he understood it. The way the group stiffened. The way their smiles faded. One of them took a step back. The man's voice stayed calm. "You don't want problems you can't finish," he said. "Walk away." The group hesitated. Pride pulled them one way. Fear pulled them another. The streetlight flickered, casting uneven shadows. Finally, someone muttered something under his breath. Another turned away. One by one, they stepped back from the door. "This isn't over," one said, trying to sound confident. The older man did not answer. The group disappeared down the street, their voices fading into the night. Inside, the store felt suddenly larger. The cashier leaned against the counter, breathing out slowly. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I did," the man replied. "No one should feel trapped at their own job." The cashier looked at the patch again, now fully aware of what it meant. "You're with them," he said quietly. The man nodded once. "I am." There was no pride in his tone, no threat, just fact. "I don't agree with hurting people," the man continued. "I do believe in stopping it." The cashier nodded. He felt no fear now, only a deep sense of being seen. They stayed until closing tasks were done. The man talked about the road, about long rides and quiet mornings. The cashier listened, surprised at how ordinary the conversation felt. When it was time to leave, they stepped outside together. The street was empty. The night air felt cool and clean. "You handled yourself better tonight," the man said. "I didn't feel strong," the cashier admitted. "Strength isn't loud," the man said. "It shows up anyway." The cashier locked the door and watched the man walk away, the sound of boots fading into the distance. That night, the fear did not return. Something else took its place. Not confidence. Not yet. But belief. Belief that respect could be defended. Belief that silence could still have a spine. Belief that sometimes help arrives quietly and leaves just as quietly after making all the difference. The days that followed felt lighter, even though nothing on the surface had changed. The cashier still worked the same hours. The pay was still the same. The store still smelled like coffee and cleaner when he walked in. But something inside him had shifted. He noticed it the first time a customer spoke sharply to him, and he did not shrink. He stayed polite, but he did not rush his words or lower his eyes. He noticed it when he walked home after closing and his shoulders were not pulled tight around his ears. Fear still existed, but it no longer ruled every step. The group did not return. At first, he expected them every night. He watched the windows, listened for footsteps, prepared himself for the knock that never came. 1 week passed, then another. The street remained quiet. Other workers from nearby shops began stopping in again, talking casually, unaware of how close the place had come to feeling unsafe. One evening, as the cashier wiped down the counter, he realized he was humming under his breath. The sound surprised him. He could not remember the last time he had done that at work. The older man returned a few more times over the next weeks. Always calm, always respectful. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. His presence no longer felt like a shield, but like a reminder. On one quiet night, the cashier finally asked the question that had been sitting with him. "Why did you stay?" The man thought for a moment before answering. "Because I've seen what happens when people don't," he said. The cashier nodded. He understood that more than he could explain. As time passed, the cashier began making small changes. He spoke to the store manager about better lighting outside. He asked about adjusting closing times so no one worked alone too late. The manager listened. Maybe not because of fear, but because of care. One night, a younger coworker asked him how he stayed so calm during late shifts. The cashier paused, then smiled. "You learn," he said, "and you look out for each other." The words felt true when he said them. The final night of the month arrived quietly. The older man came in one last time, bought a small item, and stood near the counter as closing time passed. "I won't be around much after this," the man said. The cashier felt a strange tightness in his chest. "I get it," he replied. "You don't need me," the man said. "You've got your footing now." The cashier locked the door and turned off the lights one by one. The store settled into silence. Outside, the street looked peaceful. At the door, the man paused. "Remember," he said, "respect isn't something you ask for quietly. It's something you carry." The cashier nodded. "Thank you," he said. The man tipped his head once and walked away, boots steady against the pavement. The cashier watched until he disappeared, then turned toward home. The night air felt cool, but not heavy. Each step felt his own. Weeks later, the cashier stood behind the counter as usual. A customer smiled and wished him a good night. He smiled back, genuine and relaxed. When closing time came, he locked the door without hesitation. The bell rang softly. The sign flipped to closed. The store no longer felt like a place of waiting fear. It felt like a place he belonged. And that was the real change. Not the absence of danger. Not the presence of protection. But the quiet growth of someone who learned that dignity does not need to shout. And courage does not always arrive in the way you expect. Sometimes it comes in the form of a stranger who stands beside you. And sometimes it stays with you long after that stranger walks away.